Now sink into the floor.
I don't want you to be my gynecologist. I'll do the exam myself. Give me the speculum.
2023 was the year of me being stabbed in the back by all of my favorite tropes. My jacuzzi jets have a mind of their own, unlike the main character in this book.
And the reason that these reviewers are so mad is because the book is quote unquote woke.
I could not believe how homophobic this book was.
It's giving Huckleberry Finn.
The scent of getting called the N-word in the comment section. What's up, cuties? Today I'm going to be filming my worst reads of 2023. Earlier in 2023, I got in the bathtub and filmed a video that I called Soaked in Smut, where I was in the bath reading smutty scenes. I'm gonna be doing the same thing for my worst books, except I am going to be using this incredible bath bomb that a loved one got me for Christmas, and it's a shark. Yum, 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 yum. And apparently it explodes in red. So this is going to be a bookish bloodbath. The sheer carnage that you are about to witness is exactly what each of these books did to my soul. These are books that I am worse off for reading. These are books that I wish I could leave behind the way my father left me, my brother, and my mother behind as a child. Without further delay, let the bloodbath begin. All right, well, it's purple. That was about as disappointing as these books. Yeah, we're gonna add one. That did nothing for me, just like Sex with a Man.
I'm so excited.
There are 7 books in this list in no particular order because you cannot assign a numerical value to the amount of time that was wasted. The exception being the top 3 books. But let us get started by talking about The Secret Talker. I cannot remember who wrote this book because I tried as deeply as I could to eradicate this book from my memory. This was one of my most anticipated releases of not 2023, but I believe it was 2022. And I didn't get around to it. For some reason, I just never picked up the book, despite the fact that I was so deeply excited to read it. And now I know why. My ancestors were tapping me on the shoulder like, they were pushing my head under the water, you know what I'm saying? Let the waves fall. I should have listened. Listen to your ancestors, kids. They know what they're talking about. Unless you're white, then don't listen to them. Cease and desist. The Secret Talker is everything that I love on paper, right? I love me a slow burn thriller, especially a thriller that is non-Western. This is a work that was translated into English and comes from an Asian author. And it follows this woman who finds out that she has a stalker. She is, throughout the course of the novel, trying to survive the stalker and also figure out the stalker's identity. This book managed to make it onto my worst books list despite it being under 200 pages. I spent a mere 2 hours reading this book and it still haunted me for the rest of the year. I read it, I want to say, in maybe March or April, maybe even February, which is why, oh no, not February, because I only read Black authors in February. The fact that it stuck with me for this long when I was sitting and thinking about my worst reads of the year, the fact that this popped up in my head before I even consulted the worst books that I have ranked on Goodreads, tells me that it has to be on this list. And so it is a slim story where, like I said, this woman finds out that she has a stalker. Now the problem is she is delighted, and this would be absolutely fine for certain kinds of characters who are already unhinged, right? But this character is essentially a woman who is reading these emails from the stalker, who is telling her, I was watching you at the library today. I was watching you walk across the square. I followed you here. I followed you there. 1 fish, 2 fish, blackfish, catfish. I could not stand it because she was thrilled. She was thrilled about having a stalker, which, okay, like we said, perhaps this is an unhinged kind of protagonist. This is somebody who is very dark and obsessive, and that would make sense. That would actually be something I would love to read. How cool would it be to have a narrative where there was a stalker and the person who was stalked was so into it that they were stalking the stalker. That sounds cool, right? No, that's not what happened here. This stalker was sending her the most condescending, sexist ass messages, talking down to her the entire time, and it was merely the attention that she found attractive. That was my foot scraping the bottom of I didn't fart, I swear. I could fart in this bathtub and have a more pleasurable experience from that than I did from reading this book. And this is set as a psychological thriller, but there's absolutely nothing thrilling nor psychological about the novel. In reality, this is actually a romance novel, and so this is more so a classic case of mismarketing, but also the cover indicates thriller. Everything about the marketing and the cover, the blurb on the back of the book gives thriller. It's not a thriller, it is a romance. And when you find out who the stalker is, I was infuriated. Let's talk about the husband. So this is supposed to be a romantic story of a white man who marries an Asian woman, and they get married and live a life together. The problem was that the white man very clearly fetishized Asian women and just generally did not have respect. I just found this book to be deeply, deeply disappointing. It's not so much that it was terrible. It's not the worst book in terms of the writing was horrible and all of these other things. It didn't give what it was supposed to gave, and I think that really hurt the book as a whole because readers went into it expecting one thing and getting completely something else. And now we have to talk about the things we do to our friends, the things this author did to my patience. Make it make sense. I need us to stop hyping up basic ass books simply because they are dark academia. Things We Do to Our Friends on paper sounded so incredible to me. It is set at this school, this elite school in Scotland. That was not a fart, by the way. That was a, if I fart, I'll let you know so that you guys can leave the room. So it's set at this elite school at Scotland. I love books that are not set in the US. I love the trope of going away to school. And in this book, we are following a protagonist who, of course, has a dark secret, and she goes to the school and she has to make friends. She wants to make friends. She wants to fit in, but she has a past. Okay, that's how you know that she's a protagonist, because she's got a past. What frustrates me about this main character in a commercial thriller has a past is that the hints of this past is usually the whole of the characterization for this character. And it's just not enough for me. Personally, I don't need the promise that you had a character in the past and then now you're just like a blank slate because you're trying to keep everything. I don't need you to have been a character. I need you to be a character now. Like, time is short. There's a bunch of books to read. You are lucky I'm picking up this thriller as it is, given that white dark academia always lets me down. Almost always lets me down. Here we are again, looking like a dumbass in front of my ancestors because they told me to run. I went right back into Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm simply just gonna read you the synopsis to this cookie cutter ass book, and I think you'll already begin to imagine where I went wrong. Edinburgh, Scotland, a moody city of labyrinthine alleyways, oppressive fog, and buried history. The ultimate destination for someone with something to hide. Perfect for Claire, of course it is, who arrives utterly alone and yearning to reinvent herself. And what better place to conceal the secrets of her past than at the university in the heart of the fabled, cobblestoned old town. So the leader of this pack of girls is Tabitha, who is beautiful, glamorous, rich, elite, and she takes Claire to all of these parties, all these secret parties, and indoctrinates her into wealthy Edinburgh society. And in the midst of all of this, this group of friends starts to get into something very, very dangerous. They cook up this scheme. I'm not gonna spoil it, but Claire realizes that she's in way over her head. This is why I keep picking up dark academia books, because I am a person who loves to read for the vibes. I think that sounds great, like the foggy cobblestoned road, underbelly of wealthy society, like all of that. I think that that sounds so cool, and it can be a very, very well done and fascinating book if the writing is strong enough, the plot is strong enough, and the author makes sure to stay away from the formulaicness that many of these books fall into. This one did not. I think the biggest way that this book catfishes you is the prologue. I was hooked. I was like screenshotting the prologue, sending it to friends, because this book starts out with a scene of pure horror and terror.
This is it. This is the end. You're probably wondering how I drowned here.
Excuse you. My jacuzzi jets have a mind of their own, unlike the main character in this book. And that was the extent of thriller and horror in the book. It was as if the author put all of her talent into that prologue and said, you know what, I'm gonna hook you. I'm gonna make sure that you click on this YouTube video for post 30 seconds. And if I can get past that 30 seconds of watch time, you're gonna stay. My father is the perfect example that showing up does not mean one is going to remain. And that was part of why I kept reading the book, because I was thinking, surely on the next chapter, we're gonna return to that incredible atmospheric, terrifying scene from the beginning. No, we are being promised unhinged psychological thriller terror. No. None of that. There was nothing compelling about these girls. And I wanted it to be so bad because one of my favorite tropes is toxicity between a group of girls in terms of codependence, obsessiveness, because when you have a book that unpacks those themes, amazing things can happen. Incredible writing and incredible storytelling can come out of unpacking cult mentality, can come from unpacking what toxic looks like. And some of my favorite books of 2023 did that very successfully, but not this one. And then you get to the plot twist, and I found it hilarious. I was cackling. Do y'all remember Hereditary? There is a scene, you know that scene? You know what I'm talking about. That scene, when I saw that in theaters, I knee-jerk burst out laughing. I thought that shit was so funny. I could not, because it was just so deeply ridiculous. Burst out laughing, was hunched over, trying to cover my mouth because I didn't want to be rude. People were staring, you know, I'm being an asshole, but I just couldn't stop laughing. So I'm like wheezing until I finally get it together. And that was me when the villain of the book, I just fucking can't. I just can't. The protagonist of this book gives, I can't let things go. Let's talk about Christmas and Mistletoe. I like to describe this as a holiday romance. I read this in December, and it is supposed to be a cute sapphic romance between a music executive and a musician who is up and coming. And the music executive wants to sign the musician. It is a hate to love kind of thing. The musician, of course, wants to be independent, wants to be in charge of her own life. I absolutely love holiday books. I love Christmas books. Every year, I mean, this is only the second year that I did it, but I host the Holiday Book Rush where I can read books from all holidays during the winter season, and I just absolutely adore it. So I was really excited about Christmas and Mistletoe. The cozy, snowy farm atmosphere, the small business depiction, the interesting premise, the creative protagonist, all of that. So before I shred this book, I do want to talk about some things that this book did incredibly well. First of all, that Christmas magical atmosphere was excellent. The depiction of a small town was brilliant as well. I loved how there was so much queer community, queer elders, and the queerness felt very natural and organic. It didn't feel forced in any way, shape, or form. It was celebrated and it was beautiful. One of the protagonists comes from a queer family and has 2 dads, and I absolutely adored that as well. Unfortunately, that's where my adoration ended. I could not believe how homophobic this book was. I have read few books that were more femme-phobic and homophobic in general and hating of closeted people than this one. Essentially, there is a character named Delilah who is demonized throughout the entire story because she didn't want to come out of the closet. But this goes past Delilah. The music executive love interest says repeatedly and unchallenged throughout the novel,
being out of the closet is the only way you can truly be who you are.
And completely ignores, doesn't even mention all of the very important reasons that some people may decide to not be out as queer. It also feeds this narrative that coming out is something you do one time. Like I walk out in the street and I say, hey, I'm gay, and somehow everybody knows. But in reality, coming out is something that you have to do every single day depending on who you are, especially if you are not clocked as queer, right? Especially if you are multi-marginalized in some ways. Now I have a whole dedicated video talking about how toxic this book is, but my biggest issue outside of the anti-closetedness, like why are we still demonizing closeted people? For whom?
I just have so many questions.
And of course, the only time non-binary people were mentioned, it was as a joke. There was this weird off-the-cuff comment about a non-binary snowman, and it just didn't make any fucking sense. It was like the author had been told that they have to have a non-binary requirement, and she said, I know, this is the non-binary representation we need in 2023. And that's the representation we got. And this is why I read a non-binary book club. Join. Outside of the despicable way that closeted queer people were represented and treated throughout the novel, and also used throughout the novel, the biggest issue that I had was the abuse. I actually think her name is Claire. I think it's Claire and Ruby. Claire is abusive. The whole novel hinges upon Claire forcing Ruby, as they fall in love, to be signed and to go be with a big record label and to like blah, blah, blah. And Ruby has trauma. Actual trauma surrounding being signed by a label. She went through it earlier on in her music career and it didn't end well, and she promised herself never again. She wants autonomy over her music. And the whole message of this book is that in order to be valid as a musician, you have to be signed. You have to want your name in headlights. And that is such a toxic message for so many people, not just music artists, but also content creators of any kind, painters. There are so many artists and creatives who don't want to be big, who don't want that attention. And what was frustrating was that Ruby at no point in time said that she wanted that. In fact, she said the opposite. Every time Claire pressured her, she would say, no, I don't want that. I like being small. I like knowing who my audience is. I like having these intimate shows. And Claire consistently called her a coward and bullied her until Ruby realized that that's what she wanted all along. I don't like that. Ruby at no point in time had any agency throughout the novel. I just really didn't like it. The novel assumes that any female musician who is dressing in a sexy way is doing so for a man's benefit. And honestly, I would not have been shocked to find out that this book was written by a man. You know what I mean? Like, that is exactly how it read. It read, I am a straight male writing lesbian characters. And it was very weird for me to see the representation like that. But this author has many other books out, and so it's just possible that this just was one that wasn't for me. And I'm sure there are plenty of queer people who enjoyed and loved this book, but I was not one of them. I will not be reading anything from this author in the future. The amount of times that Ruby would set boundaries and Claire would run all over them, and then when Ruby would stand up for herself, Claire would raise her voice, use the most forceful communication possible in order to get Ruby to back down. And I really didn't like that. It made my skin crawl. There's even a scene where the audacity of this woman, it could never be me. Claire's ex-girlfriend gives her a car and Ruby says, oh, like, you know, where's this car from? And Claire goes, it's from Delilah, and if you have a problem with Delilah being in my life, you can get out now. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? Like, didn't even allow Ruby to ask any questions, didn't open any dialogue, didn't even acknowledge the reasons why Ruby may or may not be comfortable with this. And Ruby didn't even have a chance to say how she felt about it. She just asked a question and Claire snapped on her. And I have in the Waste My Time video where I talk about this book, I give tons of examples directly from the audiobook so you can hear for yourself. This is all I'm gonna say about it, but this is an abusive relationship, and this book is unhealthy to queer closeted people. This is the worst queer representation that I've read in a really long time. I'm not even gonna say thank you next, I'm just gonna say next. Oh my god, such pretty flowers. 2023 was the year of me being stabbed in the back by all of my favorite tropes. I absolutely love the poisonous flower, the botanist, the beautiful, mysterious woman in the garden house, that kind of thing. I love all of that. I love the weird, obsessive, body horror undertones books with a literary feel. I love all of that. Everything about this book, everything that this book was promised, was disappointing. It was like the author wrote the premise for her novel and then said, that's it, my work here is done. Let me stop, because what really upset me was these characters and the sheer unbelievability. Here is my issue with the something weird is happening in this house, and the is it physically held in the house but has to stay for some reason. Here's my issue with that, is a lot of times the reason that these authors come up with is giving no sense. And my #1 worst book is the same exact way. So I should be talking about these books together, but no. Even Such Pretty Flowers pales in comparison to my #1 worst read of the year. It is on many of BookTubers' favorite reads of the year. And I'm like, Did I get the unedited version? Did I get the discount version? Did I get the Family Dollar version of this book? I just fucking can't. And it sucks because the dollar store has never disappointed me, but that book did. So I feel like it's disrespectful to Dollar Tree as a whole to compare the two. So the premise of Such Pretty Flowers is that this girl who doesn't deserve a name is devastated when her brother dies. Her brother dies in a mysterious way, and he texts her and says, "Oh God, get it out of me." And then in a few hours he's dead, and he apparently split himself open in the bath. Me eyeing my plants over there like, don't fucking touch me, hoes. These hoes ain't loyal. And she is convinced that his beautiful, enigmatic fiance named Mara is the culprit. So Mara suddenly takes a great interest in her, and she has like a big boner for Mara and always has. So she moves into Mara's house as her roommate, despite the fact that Mara is wealthy as funk and doesn't need no damn roommate. So that's red flag 1, 2, and 3. I need this airplane to stop interrupting. Thank you. How dare people have places to go over my house? Rude. She moves in, and Mara is a botanist and has all these creepy ass plants in a greenhouse in her home. Promptly, the two of them start. You know what I'm saying? In the arms, like, you know what I'm saying? You know what's going down. Those are the sounds coming from the bedroom, if you know what I'm saying. Not my bedroom, because it is dry as a desert in here. So they start screwing. I just don't know if it's the way my sense of loyalty and my sense of family is set up. But if I suspect you for murdering my brother, sleeping with you is the last thing that's gonna happen. And so her plan is to get close to her and learn her secrets and slowly kind of like, oh, when she's out of the house, she's doing investigating to figure it out. And perhaps this is just a difference of being. I would have tied that girl to a chair and we would have had a long conversation. There wouldn't be any subterfuge. I'm gonna be like, yo, what's good? My brother is dead and you have explaining to do. What's happening? So the longer that she spends in this house, the more body horror she's experiencing. She starts to have this illness, and she finds out that somebody else that Mara was close to had the same illness, and that girl really is not doing well. Like, she can't get out of bed. She's struggling. She's always having seizures, and everyone's like, oh, I wonder what's wrong. Well, we'll just leave her in bed. It's fine. And of course, by the time that ain't shit protagonist realizes that she's in over her head, it's too late. And now we're in a full-blown misery situation. Kathy Bates is like, this is my time to shine. You know what I'm saying? And I just didn't buy the reason that she stayed. I didn't buy all the red flags. It is specifically because of her feelings for Mora. And I just can't wrap my head around that. It wasn't believable to me. It would be different if they had perhaps had a long childhood history. But she just thought Mora was hot. And she was so enticed by her sexiness that she struggled to remember that this woman murdered her brother. I just can't. It could not be me. I have ex-friends that I wouldn't turn my head to if I passed them on the street 1 inch apart, and I would still go to war for those people. Do you know what I'm saying? So every single page made my blood crawl. I will say the writing, the poison plants, that kind of thing, the dark plant imagery was beautiful, but it still paled in comparison to Tripping Arcadia by Kit Makis, who is a trans author who wrote a similar type of story before this even came out, and it was way, way, way better. So if you liked Such Pretty Flowers or you're thinking about it, I highly, highly recommend that you just read Kit's book instead. And a lot of people said that they really loved like the lush, dark plant imagery, but I'm telling you, it was basic plant writing in comparison to what Kit did. Also, Mora was not an enigmatic villain. It would potentially be another thing if Mora had this amazing dark psychological quality that we were being told as a reader that she had. I could probably draw a stick figure of Mora and be more attracted to it than the descriptions of this woman. It didn't make any sense. I find it hard to swallow that we were simply being told that this woman was so enticing and manipulative when she wasn't. From the second that Holly, I think is her name, moves into the house, Mara is very cold and starts blowing up at her over little things. She made it very clear that she was a villain from the onset. Like, oh, she was super psychologically enticing and irresistible in the beginning, and then she shows her true colors. Her true colors were always on screen. I just didn't understand. This book got a 1 star, and I wish I hadn't read it. Whew. And now, friends and enemies, we are down to our top 3 worst books of the year. We're going to put in our number 3 slot, let's say, Big Swiss. Big Swiss is gonna go in our number 3 spot. There is going to be a dedicated Waste My Time video that is linked down below, where I talk about Big Swiss extensively. First of all, so the synopsis of Big Swiss, again, this is why I'm saying this 2023 was my year of being stabbed in the face by my favorite tropes. So clearly I don't have taste. This is not even me critiquing these authors. It's me critiquing myself, because I'm the one who picked up this book. I'm the one who picked up these books, so it's on Jesse, okay? You know what I mean? So honestly, anytime I'm interested in a book, it's just shoot on sight, because I'm over it. I'm gonna go back to reading Dr. Seuss. 1 fish, 2 fish, blackfish, catfish. Like, I just fucking can't. I can't live with any more disappointment. I'm already Black and trans in America. I'm doing really well. Yeah, my therapist, yeah, she's making her money's worth. Yep, I'm actually thinking of going off my meds. I'm not even gonna make the obvious joke about plot holes and Swiss cheese and all of that. We're just gonna let it go. But it would be fair to do so because the book itself wasn't original, so why would I have to tell original jokes? And what's frustrating about it is that it is everything that I'm into. We have a book where we are following a sex therapist who does unconventional sex therapy. And the protagonist of the book is this woman who was hired to transcribe the sex therapist sessions. Does that not sound amazing? It sounds increíble. Greta falls in love with one of his clients whose name is Big Swiss. She is from Switzerland and she is an absolutely beautiful woman. I forget her name. Flavia. It was Flavia. Flavia is tall, cold, very flat affect. She falls in love with her throughout the course of the sessions, and I just find it really, really interesting because there was nothing to love about this woman. And I can relate to that because there's nothing to love about me neither. And then you get multi-POVs. You get Flavia's POV, you get Greta's POV, you get the sex therapist POV. It's set in New York City as well. Now, I love books that are unapologetically about sex, that are messy. And I went into it really excited about the depiction of sex therapy. That is so important, especially sex therapy in terms of womanhood and female pleasure. And, oh my God, that's right. The reason that Flavia's in therapy is because she's a gynecologist who's never had an orgasm. Such a cool premise, right? Oh, hold on, my battery's dying and I just want to die with it, so give me a second. Ring light rant time because the sun went down and it's bleaker than my bank account. I was really excited about this. Like, yes, we get to talk about the difficulties that many women have orgasming. We get to talk about the psychological barriers to female pleasure and like having an orgasm. We get to talk about what this means through a queer context, all of these things. No, that's not what we got. We thought, okay, cool, well, we get to have some sexy confessions and have the great therapist help people work through it. No, the great therapist just had a bed that he invited his clients to screw them. So that was the sex therapy. The depiction of therapy was chilling. Ooh, there's glitter in this bath bomb. I feel like Mariah Carey. Well, she would have made better book choices. And then not only does Greta fall in love with Flavia, she decides to start stalking Flavia so that she can meet her, and then they start dating, unbeknownst to Flavia's husband. So Flavia's having an affair. So now Greta and Flavia are going to Pound Town in secret, and Flavia has no idea that Greta is the one who's been transcribing her sessions, and that's why she knows Flavia so well. So Flavia thinks that she's just got it made. And what's funny about this is that's the whole premise, right? Is like, I'm going to this therapist because I've never had an orgasm. So the therapist prescribes her a Hitachi. She has an orgasm, and that's the last we ever mention it. And then after that, actually, she starts having orgasms all the time. Like, all she needed was a little buzz. Now we're in the light year, if you know what I'm saying. Flavia went to the sex therapist, said,
I'm having trouble orgasming.
The therapist said, oh, I fucking can't. So again, now we're in this age where authors like feel pressure because of like Instagram, BookTok, all these things, to come up with the most
plot-worthy plot, the most exciting, gimmicky thing. And that was the case with Christmas and Mistletoe. The author was like, all right, what cool unknown duo can I do? What hasn't been done before? So they said music exec and versus musician. Okay, ooh, well, here's a gynecologist who's never had an orgasm. And I just found it so hard to suspend my disbelief for even a moment. I couldn't suspend my disbelief as if I were a speck of dust in the air. To believe that a whole gynecologist who had never had an orgasm hadn't thought, Hitachi? What? You are fired. I don't want you to be my gynecologist. I don't want you down there. I'll do the exam myself. Give me the speculum. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll take care of it. I'll take the little cotton swab. I'll do the little, like, the pelvis exam. I'll do it all. Send me to medical school. If this is the future for reproductive bodies, I don't think I want to be in the future. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, oh my god, my time is nigh. My time is nigh. I need a second to calm down. This book pissed me off. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. It gets worse, believe it or not. So the author then decides to use racism as a way to make these characters quirky. The main character makes several unchallenged jokes about Asian people. And the racism was so far-fetched. It was like she wrote a line and thought,
how can I make it racist?
And just put it in even if it made sense or not. There's a joke about Japanese EBs. There is a moment where the main character's face is swollen and she says, my face got so swollen I looked Chinese. And not like even as a joke, that was her narration. White authors take racism and they be like, is this character work? And it was weird because I had people in the comment section of that video, and mind you, like, fuck what I think. There were plenty of Asian reviewers who were like, what are we doing here? This is not how I want to be represented. I had people in my comment sections on that video saying like,
I don't understand why you can't just enjoy the book.
I would love to enjoy the book, but I don't enjoy racism. And it's completely fine. Like, please don't be one of those people who jumps in and is like, well, they're trying to show that the character is morally gray. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. You're just writing a racist. Y'all be stretching out like a cat in the sun to make excuses for white authors writing characters like this and giving them free passes. It's wild. The book did not deliver on a single thing that it promised. It also was very, 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 very scoffing at discussions of trauma. So Greta and also Flavia, Big Swiss, spend a lot of time talking about how irritated that they are over the way that millennials talk about trauma, and they feel that like millennials use trauma as a reason to not handle their shit, right? That trauma is a crutch. There is a single line where the therapist says, this is why it's important to have these discussions. Big Swiss shoots it down and then it's never brought up again. And I'm like, you are a therapist. Your whole job is to okay, whatever. I think that if you are one of those people who love quirky racist characters, Big Swiss is for you. This just literally was another case of how can I take a quirky, exciting premise and then spin a mediocre novel out of it and then get an HBO adaptation. This book is being adapted. And when y'all are
like, Jessie, why are you so sensitive?
When you're not hard on books like this, they get HBO adaptations. Now this author is rich as fuck. For writing a book where we're making fun of Asian people's eyes in 2023, I just wanted to fall asleep in the bath and slip under the waves. Never again. Never, ever, ever again. And if you are recommending this book, please stop. Like, just stop. In our number 2 slot, we have Piñata by Leopoldo Hu. I was heartbroken. This was in my top 10 anticipated releases. I damn near ran. I ran to this book. I couldn't wait. This is a story of a Mexican family, a mother and her 2 daughters, who encounter I don't want to spoil it. Let's call it a relic. They encounter a relic and something follows them from Mexico to the United States. And it is like a witchy, possession novel, very much rooted in Nahuatl and Aztec culture. I loved that we finally were getting a Mexican indigenous horror novel. As somebody who is Mexican and also has Mexican indigenous ancestry, I was so excited. And the premise itself sounded like something out of my wildest dreams. Except I didn't realize that by wildest dreams, I was actually talking about my wildest nightmare. Wildest dreams! The audiobook for this book is actually what inspired me to make a video where I talk about the worst audiobooks I've ever read. I made that last year, it's down below. The scariest thing about this book was the narration via audio. It was so bad that I was afraid, and I have examples in that video if you want to hear them. I'm not gonna put myself through that again because I already I'm putting myself through enough reliving all of this trauma for y'all. So don't say I never did nothing for you. I've had the privilege of reading enough books where a male author is writing female protagonists and doing a bomb-ass job that I no longer go into these books skeptical, right? And now for the first time in a long time, I was reminded of how some men write women. That's how bad it was. Not only were all of the characters very archetypal, you have the mother who's in denial and clearly don't give a fuck about her children. You have the moody teenager who I would have been chanclad into another galaxy if I had spoken to my mom like that. To this day, I speak to my mother with reverence, but I had a traditional Afro-Mexican upbringing. I don't know about y'all. It was weird seeing that. But obviously all families are different, so I'm not knocking that. I had moments where I was jumping at the audiobook waiting for a chancla. And then you have the little girl who is the archetype of the creepy child. It reads as if the author was trying to write a screenplay for a horror movie, except the horror movie was my life. There's just so many bizarre things about this book, like how the little girl was dubbed weird for wanting a telescope and it creeped the family out. She was a very smart, very curious kid, and anytime that she exhibited any kind of interest that wasn't girly, she was labeled odd or strange by her own parents. And this wasn't in the context of, oh, I'm trying to provide social commentary. It was like, no, it's just weird that a girl would want a telescope. And I'm like, again, this is why I'm like, have you met a girl? Like, what is going on? Besides their archetypes, they had absolutely no characters. I don't mind if you have an archetypal character, but I do need you to expand at some point. Maybe before the end of the novel, I don't know. Myself and a lot of other Mexican reviewers had an issue with the depiction of Mexico as just a violent, dangerous place where no woman feels safe. Didn't love that. I didn't love the demonization of Mexico while we were simultaneously uplifting indigenous Mexican culture and practices and mythology. The dissonance didn't make any goddamn sense to me, personally. Later on in the book, seemingly out of nowhere, we get another perspective of this incredible character who should have been the protagonist of the novel, who realizes that this family is going to be in danger, realizes that something is about to follow this family, and she takes it upon herself as a poor woman to find her way across the border of Mexico quite easily, may I add. I think her name was Yeltsi. I'm just going from memory. And she makes it her mission to just help this family, to track them down, warn them of the danger. Again, this is very archetypal, right? We see this archetype in so many different cultures. The magical Negro trope, like, you know what I'm saying? So of course she is the indigenous magical person who has to clue in the protagonists who are more privileged than her in literally every single way. And once her purpose is served, not only does she really get screwed over in the novel as a, result of being so selfless, but then she's just left to wander her way back to Mexico alone. No money, no support. It was disgusting. Again, just the use of female characters, especially within the context of Mexicanness and Mexican identity, was odd to me personally. On top of that, the writing, the dialogue was not it. The fear factor of the book didn't come in until the end, and the ending scenes were so off the fucking walls. And I'm just like, where was that energy middle of the book, beginning of the book, between the middle and the beginning, in the prologue. Like, where was this energy? And it really, really sucks because I thought that this would potentially be my favorite book of the year.
Would skip it if I were you.
And finally, we are going to talk about my worst book of the year. The number one book that wasted my time, the reason that I am sitting here in the bath, which is simulating being in the womb before I was born and had to endure this trauma, before any of this ever happened. And that book is none other than The Writing Retreat by Julie Bartz. I read this book because y'all told me to, and I ain't never listened to y'all again. I ain't listening to y'all, I ain't listening to myself. Akasha is picking out my books from now on. People are still raving about this book, and I just want to know why. So The Writing Retreat, if you are lucky enough to be unfamiliar, follows a group of writers who are invited to this beautiful remote house in the winter wonderland for a month by this really wonderful celebrated author who's very reclusive, right? So this author suddenly invites these talented young writers into her home and says, you have 30 days to write a novel and I'll give you a 7-figure deal. So it's a very competitive environment, dark academia, writing. I love books about writers, and I was pretty excited about it because everyone was telling me to read it, but I also just had a feeling. I don't know. It's that pinch in my gut that I need to start listening to. Even my gut could not have predicted how terrible this book would be. I don't even know where to start. Should we start with the cartoon villain? What is it about like us being told that these wealthy reclusive female characters are enticing simply because they're quiet and they have money? I'm gonna need you to set the bar a little higher, my friends. The villain was cartoonish, and y'all know I just can't stand me a cartoon villain. I love villainry. I love a villain I can root for. I love a villain that I love to hate. And there was just nothing compelling about it, about this villain. The characters were all archetypes, the side characters. They were all archetypes, none of which got expanded upon. But we have to talk about the wokeness. Karens on Goodreads were throwing this book out of their windows. They were feeding it to their fireplaces. I read a review where one woman complained so hard to Book of the Month that Book of the Month returned her $9. And the reason that these reviewers are so mad is because the book is quote unquote woke. And what's funny is I was like, where? What book are you reading? It's hilarious because I would actually describe this book as the absolute opposite of wokeness. This book is honestly the epitome of what white people think woke is supposed to be. Because this was actually the most forced political discussions and performative novel that I think I have ever read. Nope, not the worst, but it's really freaking close. Again, just like Big Swiss, making weird points to squeeze in bits about race that don't make any sense. There's a conversation that has nothing to do with race, and one character brings up slavery to the only black woman in the room. Just brings up slavery. And then this is used as a transition for the main character to respond to that comment in her head, say that she's frustrated with how the topic of slavery is avoided.
There's so many things wrong with this.
It's very clear that that comment only was made so that the main character could show the reader that she was not racist. She wasn't racist. Even in her internal dialogue about it, she's not thinking, wow, like that's really shitty what just happened to Kiara. Of course her name's Kiara. I should check in with her later. No, none of that. And let's talk about this black girl. Let's talk about this character. So, to be fair, all of the characters were archetypal, including the black character, and this is not surprising. This doesn't surprise me. It's just interesting that you would write a book about writing books and lack all imagination, even when it came to your own characters. The black character, of course, was not only this like beautiful meditative spirit, but she was also the only one who had any street smarts, who was resourceful in any way, who would stand up and who would be the mouthpiece for the whole entire group. She was literally the epitome of the strong black girl, and I know that the author thought that she was just doing the Lord's work. And this is just so many examples of all the ways that this book is performative. And there was a scene later it was like a life or death moment, and of course, who saves the day? The black girl. And I know so many of you are gonna be like,
but what do you want, Jesse? Do you want the black girl to like be in the background or blah blah blah?
And I don't even have time to begin to address such a shallow reactionary comment because you know damn well, I know even as you're typing that comment, that you know you haven't even thought it through to the real implications of what I'm saying. So I'm just gonna let you make that comment. Give me that engagement, because Lord knows your boy needs it. It makes so much sense why this book is constantly compared to Donna Tartt's writing, because Donna Tartt is the most prolific and celebrated racist on Bookstagram, BookTube, in the book community as a whole. So it really doesn't surprise me that the same exact readers who are loving Donna Tartt despite knowing damn well the criticism against her racism are also applauding and recommending this book. Like, it doesn't surprise me one bit. Let's continue talking about the wokeness though. This wokeness that they're talking about, there is a mention of this beautiful love story between a Jewish woman and a Nazi during the war. That wokeness, the Karens were very upset that it wasn't labeled that the book was explicitly queer, because that was woke to them. So just having a queer character that's not wokeness. That's not what it means. I feel like the people who are using the term woke don't know what the fuck it actually means. Taylor is the character that is racist and is like basically used as a way to show how good of a character the main character is.
The character was written racist so that we could know it was a bad person.
Is that the only way to tell a person is bad? You gotta use slurs?
There weren't any slurs in this book
That we can recall. I'm not impressed. If you can't, as a writer, think of any way to show this person is gonna tag hateful or ignorant, I just think it's giving Huckleberry Finn. Again, this is where I compare it to Such Pretty Flowers, because it's the same trope of y'all should leave. You should go, and y'all know you should go. And the characters stall, and the characters stall until they finally get it together and they decide to go. And that's when a Kathy Bates moment comes out, right? Now they're trapped. Now they can't go. And now we're thinking shoulda, coulda, woulda been. At least with Such Pretty Flowers, despite the fact that Maura was half of Holly's size, but I'll let that go. Fear does wild things to a person. I get it. I've been there. I too have been paralyzed by fear. And I too have been psychologically frozen by another person who has mentally dominated me. Like, I think most of us have been there in some way, shape, or form. I can be a little bit more forgiving of Holly's poor choices, not the ones where she's sleeping with her brother's murderer. That was weird. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. There were 5 of you in this house. And when the homegirl really showed her face and said,
"You can't leave,"
you all said, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." Look, it's not about condoning violence. It's that if the one person on 5 says, "Look, I can do it with my finger," just wee. There was a scene where they're snowed in, and so the woman's like, "Well, you can't leave because the snowmobile's broken." And then the black girl is like, "No, it's not." And that's the end of that. What? There just were so many ways that these people could have left, and I'm just not buying the like, oh, well, they were snowed in. There's so many ways of getting around that. I love the trap setting. I love the isolated cabin setting. That's why I run Camp Oregon. That's why I'm doing a Camp Oregon challenge every single month this year. But it has to be believable. I did not buy for a second that 5 able-bodied women who wanted to leave this house, whose lives were in mortal danger, didn't, because the villain said she didn't have a car. I think there was a gun. Oh, that's right. There was a gun. There was a gun involved. But the woman didn't have 5 guns. She had 1. 1 gun, 5 people. I just can't. And that's like a part of the reason why I tend to stay away from commercial thrillers, is because these things that these characters do, the situations, I just don't find them plausible. The solution is so obviously right there that it just takes me out of the book. That is all I have for you. This video took about 2 hours to film, and I'm cold and I'm hungry and I've got an attitude. So I'm gonna go take myself and a loved one to this cute Argentinian restaurant, and we're going to spread Black queer joy all around. And then I'm gonna work on my novel. The content that I have referenced is linked down below in the description if you want to check out any of the videos that I brought up while you were watching me have this bloodbath. But my Patreon is also linked down below too. It's Hannibal the Cannibal themed, and we do a lot of fun stuff over there. We just started this live event where we're all on live together, and we take a recipe and we make it together. Readings, friends, watch-alongs, all of the good stuff. So I would love it if you join, and I'm in love with the merch that I launched. I came up with this little slogan and I just fell in love with it, so I wanted to share it. Let me read in peace, or you will rest in pieces. So that's all up in my bonfire.
Now sink into the floor.